Hi guys, and welcome back to another video, and today there are two important things that I'd like to mention. One is that I haven't uploaded in 2 weeks. To be honest, I just didn't have the motive to upload videos that often because I've just been so busy, so utterly tired every morning, and I've just not had the chance. So I've half written the script for this video, so it's not going to be the highest quality, but I promise with my next ship video, it'll be much, much better. So, I'd also like to take a moment to welcome my brand new subscribers. Thank you, it really helps a lot. The topic of today's video is the HMHS Britannic, a hospital ship that sunk on the 21st of November 1916 just off the coast of a Greek island called Kea. Now, this ship here was a sister ship to the ill-fated RMS Titanic. The RMS Titanic had normal lifeboats. It was just, for that time period, it was, in terms of safety, it was really safe. But as we all know quite well, it sunk on her maiden voyage in 1912 after striking an iceberg. And the Titanic, in contrast to the Britannic, sunk in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Its safer and more well-built sister ship, the Britannic, only took 55 minutes. And now you're probably thinking, how could that be? Surely they must have learned from the mistakes of the RMS Titanic. And the thing is, they did. When the Titanic went on her maiden voyage, sailed for her maiden voyage, the Britannic's construction had just begun. So, after the Titanic's maiden voyage and after word had got around that the ship had sunken, drastic changes were made to the RMS Britannic at that point, RMS. I'll get on to why it was the RMS before, in a minute, Anyway, drastic changes were made to the RMS Britannic to make it the safest one in the Olympic class of ocean liners yet. She was equipped with a double hull, and the number of watertight bulkheads that could be full before she sank was increased from 4 on the Titanic to 6 on the new ship, which is an incredible change. Another change is that she was originally planned to be called the RMS Britannic. But after construction completed in 1914 due to the outbreak of World War I, she is renamed to the HMHS Britannic. And now HMHS Britannic, for future reference, stands for His Majesty's Hospital Ship, explaining the decals on the outside, the signature Red Cross of Hospitals, and the green line stretching all the way around the ship through the middle. All of the hull that was above the waterline was painted white, as you can actually see here. So we've got all this white down here, compared to it being black on the Titanic, and essentially this was what the Britannic was going to look like. Basically this, but safer. But due to the outbreak of World War I, like many other ships that I know of, became a hospital ship. The funnels were painted completely yellow. Now normally, this is just a signature, for me it's like a signature look of hospital ships. It's a completely yellow funnels. But in fact, I don't know why they're there, to be fair. But on passenger liners, this top yellow quarter or so of the funnel was black, as you can see on the RMS Titanic. Because on the RMS Titanic, because there's the smoke coming out of the funnels, it was black so that it wouldn't look too dirty. Because obviously on the Britannic there would be lots of soot coming down from the top because of the smoke. Huge changes, am I right? Anyway, on to the part you guys were here for in the first place. I'm aware that I've rambled on about the exterior and things like that. But, yeah. Anyway, on to the part that you guys are here for, the sinking. At 8:12 a.m. in the Aegean Sea, the HMHS Britannic struck a mine on her starboard side just under the bridge that would ultimately end the ship's career at sea. The German U-73 submarine had recently planted mines there and was in the area when the HMHS Britannic sank. Now, just a disclaimer, this is where I ran out of script. Okay, so I'm just going to go off it with my own words. So immediately the ship developed a slight lift to starboard. Almost the same as what remained for the whole sinking of the Titanic. Just a tiny itty-bitty lift to starboard that is barely noticeable, which is why most people on the Titanic thought she sunk with a completely even keel, in which she didn't, like a 1 or 2 degree lift to starboard. And so the captain, because the ship had been struck by a mine, obviously he was just like, we need to go check this out. Is there any water coming in? And there was, in fact, water was entering the ship through the gash in her starboard side. And one of the downfalls of this was eventually, as she developed a stronger and stronger lift to starboard, obviously, lots of the portholes had been opened by some of the nurses on board the ship to make it cooler for the patients on board. Because the Britannic, she was a hospital ship, so she would be carrying wounded soldiers and things from one point to the other. It makes sense. And so they still need proper air to properly breathe in, if you know what I mean. But yeah. So the Captain Bartlett decided that because they were so close, just pretend that my hand is the island, they were about this far apart, so land was visible, and the Captain Bartlett decided that they were just going to try to beach the ship on the island of Kea, and so the captain did not order the lifeboats to be launched, yet 2 were, and it was a huge mistake. Because while the ship is still moving, for common sense, it's really dangerous to launch a lifeboat. Because if it was moving, and you launched a lifeboat, for example, here, it would come down the side and then get chopped up by the propeller down here. Because the ship was already starting to lean further into the water. Now, one decision that would ultimately sink the boat is actually trying to beach it. Because if the Britannic had stayed still and sent the SOS call, immediately turned off if it had immediately turned off its engines, the ship wouldn't have sunk. Because if 6 compartments were full, which they were, and the ship remained still in the water, then she would have remained afloat in enough time to get everyone off. She would have had a list, but there would have been enough time for a rescue vessel to come, or something like that. Now, coming back to the German U-boat that was in the area. Well, it was a bit risky to get a rescue vessel to come, because that ship may have sunk as well. Because of a torpedo or a mine. So, in my opinion, I would have tried to beach the ship as well. And I would have done exactly what Captain Bartlett did, which was trying not to order any of the lifeboats. Sadly, 2 lifeboats were launched, and most people on board the lifeboat did die, because the propellers, it's common sense. But anyway, the ship, much unlike the Titanic, was growing further and further into the water with a stronger and stronger lift very, very quickly. 55 minutes, obviously that sounds like a long time, but when you're in a state of panic, it doesn't feel like it. So she was developing an extremely long lift to starboard, and the watertight doors were being closed. And so for a while, Captain Bartlett kept on trying to beach the ship until he decided to turn the engines off and order an evacuation. And almost everyone did eventually get off the ship, all right, alive, okay. Almost everyone. And no one was killed by the mine impact. No one was killed because of the sinking, just because of the crew members who were so impatient that they decided to launch a lifeboat while the ship was moving and let the lifeboat get chopped up by a propeller. Now, a woman who did survive one of these lifeboats that got eventually chopped up by a propeller was a woman called Violet Jessup. Now, she'd also been on the Olympic Hawk collision, which was basically the Olympic. Just imagine that this Titanic's the Olympic. And then the Britannic's like a war vessel. This basically happened, and the Olympic nearly sunk. So there were a couple of deaths that time, but not too many. On the Titanic, she sunk on the maiden voyage. Violet Jessup was on it and once again survived. And the same with the Britannic. Miraculously, she survived by jumping out of the lifeboat, and eventually she hit her head on the keel of the ship, which is a bit that runs down the bottom. So essentially they use the keel to balance the ship out and stop it from capsizing when it turns. So the keel essentially just keeps the ship from listing. And so she hit her head on that, and somehow she remained unconscious but survived, which is incredibly cool in my opinion. So as the ship was getting further and further into the water, her starboard list kept going and going and going. And eventually everyone did get off, but the ship did end up foundering in just 55 minutes. And now I think it's pretty miraculous the amount of people who died. It was that number, because it could easily have been a lot worse. And I think that's it for today's video. Goodbye.